Okay, so let's start with a show of hands. With the first question, who knows XFA? So, okay, that's already a good thing. But question 2 is, do you really know XFA? Who of those who know XFA have used XFA actively? That's a little bit less. Okay. And are you afraid of XFA? One person is. There's always one. Okay, so why am I asking these questions? Well, there has been a survey performed by the PDF Association, and one of the questions was, what are your top disappointments in 2014? And 60% of the people said, well, XFA is a big problem, and we're happy that we'll get rid of it. And 32% were sad. Now, those look incredible numbers, 66%, but actually there are only 6 respondents who talked about XFA. So that's 4 against 2. Now, another thing that happened was there was a ballot for the ISO committee where we had 2 options. Option A was retain XFA in PDF 2.0, so that's ISO 32002, and with no significant change. Option B was deprecate XFA, which means that PDF 2.0 writers should not write XFA into PDF 2.0 files, and PDF 2.0 processors should ignore XFA when encountered. And you see the result of the vote. 3 countries voted for keeping XFA, 7 countries voted against XFA, and 8 abstained. You see that Belgium voted for to keep XFA, and I'm a Belgian, so it's clear that I voted to keep XFA. Now, why did I vote to keep it? Well, what is XFA? What is this about? Well, there are 2 form technologies in PDF. We have the AcroForm technology, introduced in '96, so everybody knows it, everybody uses it. And we have XML Forms Architecture, introduced in 2003, 2004. It was introduced in 2 goes. I'm not going to talk about static XFA, also known as XFAF. That's where you have AcroForm technology and XFA technology next to each other. I'm just going to talk about what we call dynamic XFA. So AcroForm technology uses PDF syntax. So you have an AcroForm dictionary, you have a fields array in that dictionary, you have a field dictionary that is separate or combined with a widget annotation dictionary, and so on. In the XML Forms Architecture, the form, the template, is defined in XML. So you have an XML that contains a template part, that contains a datasets part with the data description and with data. You have 2 types. You have .pdf files where the PDF is a container for the XML, and you have XDP where the XML can be a container of the PDF. It's then base64 encoded. Now, in AcroForm technology, data consists of key value pairs with limited hierarchy. For instance, you have person, that's a field, and you have person.name, person.address, person.country, and so on. That's very limited. In XML, the data is pure XML using any XSD. So using an XSD of your choice. So if you have a backend where you already have XML files that obey some schemas and so on, you can keep them, and your data will be accepted in an XFA form. AcroForm technology is static. So the position of every field is fixed. You have this field, it's on page 1, on coordinates from this point to this point, and if the content doesn't fit, you can't just reflow everything and make your rectangle bigger. Whereas in XML Forms Architecture, again, I'm not speaking about static XFA, it's dynamic. The form can adapt itself to the data, and you can have repeating subforms for repeating headers, either headers of pages, headers of tables, and so on. Now, in AcroForm technology, the technology is standardized, but it didn't evolve. It lacks some essential functionality. So, for instance, you have a field, you have a text field, you can add text right aligned, left aligned, centered, but justified, that doesn't exist. So that exists in XML, and so in XFA. So the spec, one of the disadvantages of XFA is that the spec is really huge. So it takes a long time before you can build or implement XFA. and it's not an ISO standard. Now, this is the theory. Let's take a look at some examples. This is how I make invoices for iText Group NV, which is one of the iText companies, a company that doesn't make a lot of invoices. And you see that if you look inside, we have a fields array, and the fields are defined as annotations, so the field dictionary and the widget annotation dictionary is merged. And we have, for instance, code _0, item _0, amount _0, and so on. So every field here, so I cut this in two to fit the page, but every invoice line has a corresponding field with underscore and an index. I don't really like that. And one of the problems I have, well, I use this template to make my invoice. So these are some example invoices. Fortunately, I only have 1 or 2 invoice lines. But should I have more than 20 invoice lines, I'm in trouble, because it goes to item _19, and there's no item _20. So when I have more lines, I need to create a second page. So should I make a specific template for a second page and then repeat it? That's one of the things that annoys a lot of people when talking about AcroForms. Here we have an XFA example. So this is a purchase order, and you see different lines also for product items. And if you look inside the PDF, we see we have an empty fields array in the AcroForm dictionary, and we have some XML streams, like here, data, form 1, header, and so on, PO number. So it's pure XML. And we can make the form grow dynamically. So when I click on this button, add item, more lines are added, and you see that the table is transferred to or distributed over 2 pages, and the table header is repeated because it was defined that way in the XFA form. So this is something that doesn't exist in AcroForms. Now, a warning. XFA, as Olaf said, Adobe has published the specification, just as they published the PDF specification in the past before it was an ISO standard. And everyone can use this specification, but there are some undocumented features. For instance, I posted a question on Stack Overflow, a question that I had asked Adobe many times before, never received an answer, but there is some secret sauce there that isn't explained, and up until now, the question remains unanswered on Stack Overflow. Now, pros and cons for XFA. A con that I hear a lot of times is that it's not viewer friendly. There's only decent support to view XFA forms in Adobe Reader or Adobe Acrobat, and support by other viewers is either inexistent or incomplete. And even if you look at Adobe, they have said we will not support XFA on mobile devices. So on the mobile Adobe Reader viewer, there will be no support for XFA. It's XML based, which means that as opposed to PDF, where you have this quick rendering because every page is determined on beforehand, there's slow rendering because the XML needs to be interpreted. The document doesn't know in advance how many pages there will be, and it depends on how much data there is in the XML. It's too complex because we've implemented XFA to PDF, and we started somewhere with forms from our customers, and then we got new customers, and we found out that there are hundreds of different ways to achieve the same result. And so when you develop some product, it's really annoying that we have a new customer and he did the same thing that we did for 10 other customers, but he did it in a slightly different way. So now we have to support this too. And another con, well, it was a con for the PDF specification and a plus when PDF became an ISO standard, but XFA is not an ISO standard. What about continuity? What is Adobe going to do with it? So Adobe's position on XFA makes other vendors doubt if they should invest in XFA. For instance, Foxit, Nitro, and Nuance, they also have XFA products, and they didn't oppose to deprecating XFA. Now, there are also a number of pros. It's a dynamic document. The data shapes the document, and fields can adapt to their content. So in AcroForms, if you define a field and you have a very long name, like somebody from the royal family in Belgium, and they have like 23 names. It doesn't fit in that field, and there's nothing to do about it. You can't make that field bigger. And you can have a variable number of pages. So the example I gave for the invoice, that's solved by having dynamic content. It's XML based. I know I added this on the cons side, but it's also a plus because you can use your own XSD. You don't have to force your own data into a very limited hierarchy that is available in AcroForms. And it's easy to extract and exchange data. I'll come back to that later. Functionality, there's more flexibility, it's more feature-rich. And adoption by vendors, so Adobe Acrobat and Reader support it. You have lifecycle, and Adobe is also has also licensed the technology to SAP, where it's called Smart Forms, which is a little bit confusing because Avoca is an Australian company, and they also have a PDF, an XFA designer that is also called Smart Forms. So if somebody asks us about Smart Forms, we always have to ask, are you taking it? No?
It's not called Smart Forms in SAP. That's wrong. Smart Forms is a completely different technology inside SAP.
Okay.
Similar to Subscript and developed by SAP itself.
But it's confusing.
It's confusing. SAP named this Interactive Forms by Adobe.
Okay.
And most of the users name it Adobe Forms.
Okay.
SAP Adobe Forms.
We have customers who had named it Smart Forms, and
it's completely wrong.
Okay. Okay, but it's confusing. So that's then a con. It's confusing. Viewers, there's partial support by Foxit, Nitro, and Nuance and Preview. And there are server tools by iText, so for converting XFA to PDF 2.0 if you want to, PDF A, PDF UA. And IDR, so you may know them from JPedal, which is a PDF viewer. They convert XFA to HTML5 to render a form on mobile devices. So on mobile devices, on the server you have XFA, on the mobile device the end user sees it as an HTML5 file. Now the rationale to deprecate XFA was that, well, one of them, I already named some of the cons, so that I'm not going to repeat them, but the specification is proprietary, so that's a big concern. And another concern was that XFA is prohibited in all ISO standardized PDF subsets, like PDF A, PDF UA, PDF E, PDF VT, and PDF X. Now, are these arguments valid? XFA isn't for archiving. XFA is, we use XFA in a workflow, and if you want to archive, you convert the XFA to PDF A. XFA isn't for human consumption. We use, I'll explain this later on, we use XFA as a template on the server. Our XFAs hardly ever go to an end user. And XFA isn't for printing. So what is XFA really about? When I Google what are forms used for, I get like a lot of pages about what are web forms and what are they used for. They are about HTML. So I think this is the first hit I had, this is the second hit. So when I ask what are forms about, it's all about HTML. And so forms here in this context are where people manually input data. Is this really what we do with PDF forms? For example, up until ISO 32002, when you had a PDF form and you entered some Chinese glyphs, there was, it says in the earlier specifications that the viewer can choose which encoding to use when transmitting these glyphs to a server. So we had customers using Chinese, and they said, we've entered this word, and on the server we get a completely different word. Because they thought that, yeah, the logical ways, you think that you get this code as Unicode. But it was GBK, it was Big 5, it was a different encoding. And of course in Western languages you don't have that problem, but in Asian languages the encoding is really needed. So that will be added in PDF 2.0, because I added it. But the fact that this is only solved now in PDF 2.0, or will only be solved in PDF 2.0, shows that, well, PDF for that data entry may not be the best use case. In many cases, PDF forms are used as templates to be filled out and flattened by machines. And the word form can be misleading in the context of PDF because we also have form objects. Those aren't forms. So forms, maybe you should talk about XFA templates. Here you see, for instance, something that was like a ticket to go to Cirque du Soleil. It was created manually, so in Adobe Illustrator, but then your seat, so porte, section, rangée, siège, seat is siège, and a barcode, that's added to this form, and then the form is flattened. That's a use case for AcroForms. That's the use case for XFA. Now, let's look at XFA. The previous one was an AcroForm because everything was on fixed places, and you only have one entry ticket for Cirque du Soleil. But creating a simple XFA template is like you have your XSD, and that's an XSD. In this case, it's movie with titles, and then you can have several directors, several countries, and you import the XSD as a data source. And the moment you drag and drop this data source, you get already a first example of a form. So that's created by Lifecycle Designer. There's a yellow triangle there that says, hey, we need some more info. And the info that is needed is how many times should this be repeated? For instance, you say that there can be more than one director. How are we going to deal with this? So then you reorganize, so you restructure your form, and you deal with all the yellow triangles, and you get a form. This is an empty form, and now when you inject XML into your form, and this is just my XML, movie duration equals 122 minutes, IMDb codes that number, the year 2001, and then the title and so on. And you see that my one-page form, my empty form, is now a 23-page form where I have this XML inside that says, well, this field is repeated because 2001: A Space Odyssey was produced in both the United Kingdom and in the United States. That's impossible with AcroForms. And so when we look inside the PDF, we see that we have AcroForm, we have XFA, and then we have all this XML. And here in this stream, this is the data stream. We have the original XML, unaltered, and we have a structure like movie with attributes, duration, IMDb year, and sub-tags, so nested stuff with the title, the directors, the countries. Inside directors, you have director, 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 you have the different tags. AcroForms would force you to change your schema, and maybe that's not what you want, because, well, think of ZUGFeRD. If you want to create a ZUGFeRD invoice, you may already have a cross-industry invoice, so an XML that complies with the standard for XML invoices. What are you going to do? Are you going to use XSLT to convert the XML you already have to an intermediary format? So that's what the ZUGFeRD documentation says. The ZUGFeRD documentation comes with an XSLT 2.0 example, but that example requires proprietary software. You cannot use this XSLT without purchasing an Altova license. And then you have some intermediate format, and you don't have a PDF yet. Using HTML, well, at iText we call HTML for templating a poor man's XFA. So we have XML worker that can convert HTML to PDF, but HTML and CSS aren't really sufficient for the needs of our customers. They want to make sure that everything is at the correct millimeter and that the right font is used and so on. And so they prefer XFA. And there are companies reinventing the wheel to create PDFs along with XML, and that's not a standardized way, but that's a very lucrative business model, reinventing the wheel. A possible solution would be that you have the document is the data, and that you combine CII, so the cross-industry invoice, this standard XML, with an XFA template that knows how to render this XML. And if you combine both, and you have some kind of multi-purpose XFA to PDF A3 converter, that's all you need to create a ZUGFeRD compliant invoice. You inject the XML into the XFA, you flatten the XFA, and you add the XML, the original XML, as an attachment, and you have a PDF, a PDF A3 that is suitable for human consumption, and an XML that is suitable for machine consumption. Why is this important? Well, a document is never only a document. If we look at the PO, we have data from our CRM, we have data from our ERP, we have data from our product database, we may have credentials and digital signatures and certificates, and so the PDF is the presentational logic, and we also have a business logic that calculates all so it makes a sum of all the items and then says what is the price you have to pay, what is the VAT, and so on. And in many industry, enterprise products, XML is used to transport this data, to validate this data. So let's talk about enterprise form solutions and workflows. One of our customers is the Belgian Department of Justice, and they have this project Grife done by CSC. And the citizen, he has to fill out an HTML form that when he wants to create a company. He also has his EID to identify himself, and this EID goes to, so you have the data filled out via HTML, but thanks to the EID is also authenticated, and there's a lot of data coming from other data sources, and all these data sources are combined in an XML. So on the back end, at the Department of Justice, it's a completely XML-driven workflow. And the XSD will validate if things are missing or if the XML is okay. Then somebody at the Department of Justice needs to consult this XML. How is it now consulting this XML? Well, we inject the XML into an XFA form, and now he has a human interface to this XML. And he can go back to the citizen and say, hey, this is missing, this is wrong, and so on. So this goes back and forth a couple of times until the application is complete. And then the XFA form is persisted. So with persist, I mean it's no longer interactive. It's made into an ordinary PDF. Well, not an ordinary PDF. As a matter of fact, in this case, it's a PDF A level A. And it's published. So we have the Belgian Gazette, so Moniteur Belgisch Staatsblad, where all the new companies are published. And there are very strict regulations about the form. What does it look like? So that's why they chose XFA. It's signed. Well, I added sign here. That's in the next phase of the project. They will also digitally sign it, and it's archived. So it's PDF A level A. So they store these documents like this. Now, what was sent to all the people who wanted to vote in the ISO committee. It says that XFA is a key technology in many enterprises and government organizations, and I can testify this is true. And there's no viable path to PDF 2.0 for these companies who have already invested in XFA, and there are no alternatives. So why would we deprecate it? Now, we see that Microsoft, they had InfoPath, which was their solution to design, fill out, publish forms, and they are abandoning that. So I think it's about a year ago that they said we're stopping with InfoPath. Adobe is losing the lifecycle market, and then Matt says, well, that was a bad idea, so yeah, it's good to get rid of it. I don't know about SAP, but what I do know is that, so you could say, if Microsoft and Adobe are backing out, maybe there's no market for it, but customers are asking us to fill the gap, so there is a market. It's huge and it's unserved, and AcroForms isn't going to replace this. Are there alternatives? Well, you could create PDF and XML from code. So for instance, in the case of ZUGFeRD, I'm working on a white paper where I have a database, and I create an XML from this database, and I create a PDF from this database, and then I combine them. That's an option. You can create a PDF from XML by first creating an intermediary document. For instance, you create a Word document first, and then you make the PDF. Or you create proprietary formats. So Inventive Designers has their format, Jaspersoft has their templating solution. Or you create, you use XSLFO, Apache FOP, RenderX, and Inventive Designers have a solution like that. Or XSL 2.0, Altova has a solution. Or you say, let's forget about PDF for our enterprise documents and use pure XML, like in an EDI solution. Or let's move to HTML5 or Word or OpenXML. I don't think that's a serious option, otherwise I wouldn't be here. And so we've heard in a lot of other talks that this is not a serious option. So is a deprecation of XFA a problem? Not really, because we can keep on creating XFA templates based on ISO 32001. And even if we have a PDF 1.7 with XFA inside, we can convert this or flatten this into a PDF 2.0, into a PDF A, into a PDF UA. So it doesn't really matter if XFA can or can't be used inside a PDF 2.0 document. And so we also have XDP, so why not use XDP instead of PDF? But I don't like that much because it's a suboptimal solution. I like the fact that it's PDF because then we can add binary content. And you can add binary content in an XML file, but it's not optimal. Is it a problem? Yes, because deprecation might be perceived as an indication that the technology is no longer going to be supported, which can be true, but which isn't necessarily true. And we need an XML-friendly template that is PDF-aware. There are no other templates that are PDF-aware. And part of the industry might be reluctant to adopt PDF 2.0 because deprecation, it has never happened that a feature in PDF was deprecated when there is no complete alternative available. So it's kind of a pity. So what do I propose? I say, what if we deprecated XFA only partially? Now, I don't mean that I want to introduce the word partially deprecated here. What I mean is, let's look at how would we phrase this. So this is my proposal for the normative language. Let's remove all the XFA-related content from ISO 32002. This is already happening, so that's not a big job. It's already done. And keep the XFA entry in the AcroForm dictionary, but remove the word deprecated. So the XFA key is still in the AcroForm table, in the dictionary of, in the description of the entries in the AcroForm table. But let's add, when the XFA key is present, a confirming PDF writer shall not write a fields key. So this way we deprecate XFAF. We deprecate the PDFs where you have AcroForm and XFA next to each other. This is very confusing because when you open such a document in Adobe Reader, you see the XFA content. When you open such a document in any other viewer, you see the AcroForm document. And sometimes there are differences between the two. So people say, hey, we open this document and it works in Adobe Reader but not in other viewers, or the other way around. And so by saying there cannot be a fields entry along with an XFA entry in the AcroForm dictionary, we remove one of the most annoying confusions for users, being confronted with a form that contains both technologies. Now, then you have people who open a PDF that contains pure XFA in Adobe, in something that is not Adobe Reader, and they get like an ugly message saying you're not using the right version of the viewer. We can fix this and say when the XFA key is present, the file extension of the document shall be .xfa. So there is no confusion. It's not a .pdf file, it's a .xfa file. Now the PDF specification, I don't know if it's an oversight or if it's intentional. It doesn't specify anywhere what the file extension for PDF files should be. Why would it? A PDF, not all PDF documents are files. Some PDF documents exist only in memory. However, there's a precedent in section 12781. It talks about FDF, and it says FDF is based on PDF. It uses the same syntax and has essentially the same file structure. However, it differs from PDF, and then the differences are listed. FDF files have the extension .fdf. So here we have already a format that is part of ISO 32002, where we define a different extension. And okay, FDF is defined completely in ISO 32002, and with XFA we would have a format that is defined completely outside 32002. So is there a precedent for such a technology? Yes, there is. XFDF is another format that is mentioned in ISO 32002 15 times, but it's defined completely outside ISO 32002. So if we would follow these, if we would deprecate iText, deprecate XFA without really deprecating it, because like this, we define it as a separate format using PDF syntax with essentially the same structure, but with some significant differences, and we can list the differences. Implicitly, so this is the not normative, this could go in notes. Implicitly, this means that conforming PDF writers are allowed to create XFA templates based on the PDF 2.0 specification, just like they are allowed to create FDF files, and they use PDF 2.0 as a means to create enterprise-grade templates that are to be processed on back-end systems, not as end-user forms for people to fill out manually on the front end. And conforming processors are allowed to ignore XFA, although they can read the document's objects. Just like, for instance, if you have an FDF and you don't have the corresponding full form, a PDF reader can still get the objects from the FDF. And so that could be interesting. But of course, processors should show a warning message, similar to what happens if you want to view an FDF file without having access to the form, or a warning page, similar to what happens when you have an encrypted PDF and the viewer doesn't support the encryption. Then there's something called the unencrypted wrapper. So that could be introduced for XFA too. And so conforming processors are allowed to process XFA to inject XML into a template, or to render the XML based on the template and the business rules, either to a specialized viewer, like when I showed the Department of Justice, there was a civil servant who could view the XFA form, so that could be a specialized XFA viewer. Or it could be rendered to a genuine PDF file, like PDF 2.0, PDF A, PDF UA, and as its XML is highly structured, so it's not that difficult to create PDF A level A. You already have the structure. So that's my proposal. If XFA didn't exist, we'd have to invent it, because it's an envelope for data and presentation, keeping the data separated and unaltered. If you convert the data to HTML5, you lose a lot of information. You don't lose that information if you inject the XML into an XFA form. And you have these rules that you can define to shape the data, eventually resulting in a page-based document. Again, with HTML, it's more difficult to have a page-based document. It's a template format that is PDF-aware, which means you can embed PDF pages as company stationery. And you can embed fonts, which is important if you want to use the template to convert XML to PDF-A. So you can really, if you say it needs to be Arial, you don't accidentally have a form in Times Roman when you convert it. And you can add real binary PDF objects. There is no need to use base 64 encoding for binary content. So images or whatever content you want to add can remain binary. It can build a bridge between XML and PDF, because XML, let's face it, I know it's been like a hype at some point, but it's still the format of choice for transporting data in many different industries. And XML is highly structured, which is important if you want to convert to tag PDF. So PDF-A and PDF-UA should be the formats of choice to archive and distribute documents, and XFA can become a catalyst to have more of these documents. Now, I'm going back. If XFA didn't exist, we'd have to revent it. The previous slide was because. Here it's but. We need to simplify it. We need to clean up the spec. Not 100 different ways to define the same thing. We need to remove redundancy and remove the undocumented features, which are also a pain. We need to evangelize it. Make sure it's used in the right context, because I think that many people voted against XFA because they thought of the front end, whereas we see XFA as something for the back end. Templates, not forms to be filled out by humans. We need to offer technology that converts XML into smart PDFs, PDF-A, PDF-UA, when data needs to be published for human consumption. And we have to make it a standard, or at the very least, if Adobe doesn't want to release the code as a standard, we should ask them to make a commitment to third-party vendors to ensure continuity, and to explore which parts we can legally use. And what I really want to avoid is to having to reinvent the wheel by creating yet another standard as a valid alternative to XFA. And so, again, I don't think that AcroForms is a valid alternative. So I'm ending with one last question. Who's still afraid of XFA? Maybe there are more now. I see that. Oh, he's still afraid. Okay. Are there any questions?
I am too. I am afraid because it's quite complex, and it's add more complexity to the PDF Word, I believe, only to convey structured data.
But you could simplify it. If we based on how we work to create. So a lot of people saw that in 2011, Adobe started to send signals that they were going to maybe abandon XFA, and our customers or Adobe customers came to us and said, "Can you solve this problem?" And so we started with a minimum viable product based on the templates from the first customers. And so we know that there are things that are very common, and we know that there are things that are very exotic. If we would focus on the things that are very common, we could have a really powerful technology there. But I agree, it's
I am a consultant, and I work with enterprise and administrations, and today it's so difficult to use PDF in different area, different computer, with signature, with data inside, for example, for invoices.
Mm-hmm.
It is wonderful, this solution, but so complex, I believe. Yeah. I'm not a technician. So.
Yeah.
You're getting into the area of document composition. And document composition is getting more and more easy, so that it is getting taken away from the technology people to decide the content to the business people.
Mm-hmm.
So you should consider that you're in a composition space with a very complex technology, and which is passed to the left and to the right by more easy tools.
More easy tools such as? Because
I'm not giving you a list of the vendors, but you have a few.
In the output management, there's a lot of vendors that have, and they're all going in the same direction. And I think it's the reason is also because the mobile, the different devices with different screen sizes, etc., is requiring, to do composition in a different way than, what is perceived to be associated with PDF, which is a paper page mock-up. So with mobile devices, responsive designs that we heard this morning, etc. There's this idea that you should have something that adapts to your screen, which this technology is not perceived to be doing.
It's much easier to convert an XFA form to an HTML5 form with all the responsive stuff than an AcroForm, which is static, to an HTML5.
Yes, but I think people want to skip that
but
altogether.
if you have the XFA form, you also have the template where you can inject the data, consult it in an interactive form, and then flatten it. And you have everything at hand in the template. You have your stationery, you have your images, you have your fonts, and that's something that is missing in other technologies.
I perceive that this is happening in other solutions. It's happening at the very end, so that you don't need to have all this in this intermediate state. So you go from database to something responsive to check it out, and then at the very end, according to your device that you want to print on, you create the PDF, and then it's static. So I don't know if other people understand what I mean, but I think it's perceived to be an unnecessary step to go through that can be achieved by other means.
Yeah. Well, the way I see it is that you have in ordinary setups, you have a pipeline with different things that data goes through until it becomes a PDF. And I want XFA as a shortcut, that you only have one thing between the data and the PDF. That's
I understood that.
I think that the difference between like something like XFDF and XFA is XFDF is both a very small specification and it's deterministic. One of the crucial parts of PDF is that it's supposed to be one of those things that what you see is what you get. It's essentially always the same. And when you're dealing with something like XFA, which is there's some variation how it might be sort of laid out, you're dealing with something which is fundamentally different from PDF.
It depends on the data. So the document adapts to the data. But there are rules on how it should be rendered.
But one vendor might render it slightly differently from another one.
And the problem is that in Acrobat, it's rendered sometimes differently than it's described in the spec. So that's also then you have to, as a developer, you have to make the choice: am I going to follow the spec, or am I going to follow the way that Adobe renders it? Yeah.
So I think that there is a way of thinking you have to be a little bit different than most of developers are thinking, and also those who have been involved in a business cases, is that you have to separate this one, which is looking what the users are using, and then you have the intelligent machine like XFA, which is taking the information from the user, which cannot make very complicated things to the database or whatever the XML is going on. So from my point of view, it's so that it's much better to have flexible tools in the back office than to just have one simple tool which no one can use. Because if you make it the tools you manage the information, it's so simple that the users can use it. It's not benefit for the final results of the information management, because it's the same thing going on in document records and document management side. People are not thinking at all that they are using records or document systems. They are just using their systems, and as a result, there are records created in a records database. Because people are not willing to define that I have to have this metadata field and this metadata field and this one. That should be collected from the environment, what they are using.
Yeah. One of the taglines for iText is iText is software that everyone uses but no one notices.
Yeah,
and that's what all softwares
that have to be also with the forms. Because the forms can be complicated, and it's good if you can flexible ones.
As you might know, we're using a lot of Adobe products in our projects. So I'm interested in XFA. On the other hand, I think for the use cases you're describing, you have a template in XML and you merge that into, for example, PDFA. It's not necessary that XFA exists within the PDF specification. So even though it exists outside the PDF specification, it can still serve that same use case. And so the question is, which benefit would it have that XFA exists within the PDF specification? Well, I don't see, from your use case, I don't see a benefit in having it sitting inside PDF2.
Yeah, so is deprecation of XFA a problem? No, it isn't, because you can convert PDF 1.7 files to other things. But deprecation might be perceived as abandon XFA. And that's
but it's a different format, and the use case you have, it's competing to XSLFO. Yep. And then the question is, okay, what's the position of XFA compared to XSLFO? It might have benefits there, it might have weaknesses there, but that's a comparison if you look at your use case. And then you could argue saying, okay, why don't have XSLFO sitting inside PDF? You know, it's a different from what you're describing, it's a different model to what PDF is about, because PDF is a document format and XFA is not a document.
But
it's describing how a template and data structure is processed into a document through an extra step. And that's not what PDF is about.
But you have the precedent of FDF being not a document format, but something to store data. So we could use PDF 2.0 as something to store XFA. And why would it be nice to have it in 2.0? Because then you have all these things like associated files and stuff that you can use that are new in PDF 2.0, and that you would otherwise have to say it's 1.7, but we're adding this functionality that is available in 2.0.
One more? Yeah, okay. So what's your advice to all of the companies that drank the Kool-Aid and have user-facing XFA forms that they collect data from all their customers with, and now it's deprecated? What's your advice to all of those customers?
XFA connect data.
I mean, it's an industry for us, right? But
yeah.
What should they do?
It depends on how much they are invested in XFA, and well, we made the choice to help those people and to make sure that they can still use their templates. Right. If the ISO committee says, okay, let's deprecate XFA partially, those people, they have no problem. They can still use XFA. They have been using it for years. Why not continue?
My advice would be go for HTML for data capture and PDF for the output side.
Because the IRS is going to do that?
Pardon?
Do you think the IRS will go that way?
I know that there are a lot of forms, but now the situation is that, for example, you have XFA forms not being supported on mobile. And now you have your customers accessing your website and the forms through mobile devices, and they can't process it. And you have other readers, like, let's say, on the Mac, etc., which can't process XFA files. And so the idea, I think the idea behind XFA was a very good idea, but it didn't make it to the same extent that PDF made it. And it's to some extent a similar situation that Adobe was facing with Flash. And now Flash Flash more or less is dead, and people are inventing into HTML, and I think that's a matter of fact. And the question is, of course, you invested in one technology, and that technology is superseded by another one, and it causes issues, and you have to migrate. But you don't have to migrate today, but you have to do it, let's say, step by step, looking at your options. And I think the current option, if you look at it, is data capture, interactive data capture is done through HTML.
And that's why I mentioned IDR Solutions, who offers this XFA on the server to HTML5 on the browser or on the device. And that really makes the case for XFA, because then on the server side, you have your template that knows how to display as HTML5. And once you have the data, it knows how to render the form to PDF. A, UA,
and Adobe is offering something similar. They can render XFA into HTML5 too. Yeah. But the thing is, would you like to
I have to stop you now, sorry for that. Thanks for the very lively discussion. Can be continued over lunch, or iText is around with a couple of people near their iText booth over there. And yeah, we have a couple of people. I saw a couple of people already. So, thank you, Bruno.
Okay.
Next we have Garth Thompson, so please feel free to leave the room and make room.